All right. Happy league year, everybody. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live here on Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. Thank you, everyone, for hopping in here. If you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Like this video, subscribe to the Sabres Prospects channel. If you're watching over on Twitter, come on over and join a lot of people that have been populating the chat because, as always, we're running a little behind. That's I'll take the heat for this one, Matthew. I'll jump on the grenade for you this time.
That's a good teammate, you know.
Yes,
even though it was not Kris's fault. It was not Kris's fault. As usual, it was my fault.
Don't tell him that. You're the sensitive one. I can take the heat. Okay. All right, let's get the formalities out of the way. For those who don't know who I am, I'm the old man with the wrinkles on the left, Kris Baker. You can find me on X at Sabres Prospects. With me, as always, your Sabres writer for The Athletic. You can find all of Matthew Fairburn's work at theathletic.com/Sabres. And if you go there and you're not a subscriber presently and you click on one of his 15 stories, at least he's probably written in the past couple of weeks, you can find out what the latest deal is. I think it might be $1 for a period of time, but go check it out. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And you, as always, leave a 5-star review. All right, off season, man. I'm rusty with all that stuff, but let's just get to it. Tonight on the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show, RIP JBD. The Sabres did some business to open the league year. Much like how I have a preference for blondes, the Sabres shown that they have a type at the NHL draft. But first, Matthew, a couple days ago, out goes JJ Peterka to the Utah Mammoth, and in comes two dogs and Michael Kesselring and Josh Doan. I think that's a proper place to start because it created a lot of chatter on social media, especially here in the Western New York region. I'm just going to pass it to you at a high level. Thoughts on the deal? I think that loyal listeners of this show kind of know where I was at with JJ Peterka. I'd like to hear your assessment of the deal and just your thoughts on especially what the Sabres got in return.
Yeah, I think people who listen to the show also knew the name Michael Kesselring, right? Because he popped up a few times in our conversations. Not a guy that we necessarily thought Utah would move, but Peterka, probably not a player that a lot of teams around the league thought that the Sabres would move. And so high level, I'm okay with the trade for a few reasons. Number one goes back to something that we talked about. I think the gap between the perception of JJ Peterka and the reality of JJ Peterka. There's an assumption out there that he's some sure bet to be an 80, 90 point superstar winger for the next 10 years. I think that's not a sure thing. I don't think he is destined to, who knows? I mean, he could get better. He's going to be in a good situation in Utah, in a, place where he'll be able to fit in playing on the rush with some really skilled players, but he's not a complete player yet. And I don't know if he ever will become a complete player in terms of the two-way game, the defensive impact. I think if you looked at I found interesting, may have mentioned this on the last show, is that like analytics people seemed higher on Peterka than Byram. But we mentioned the gap between Peterka with Thompson, Peterka without Thompson. Pretty big gap in terms of expected goal share, and Benson with Thompson was better. Thompson with and without Benson, basically the same. So, it's there's better stylistic matches potentially on that top line. And I think what the Sabres did is they got back two players that they need. They needed Michael Kesselring, a big right-handed defenseman who can play in the top four. He is a good puck mover. He's got good offensive ability, but he's also got some nastiness to his game, and he's big, and he's rounding out the shutdown defensive component. I think he still makes some mistakes in his own end, but I think there's a good fit there with Owen Power. They got Josh Doan, who, according to the tracking data at all three zones, Corey does some great work with zone entries and forechecking and things like that. And he tracks forecheck pressures per 60 and recovered dump-ins per 60. And Josh Doan, I think I sent you the scatter plot. He's got them all, plotted on there, every player in the league. And Josh Doan's like in his own category.
He's
way up
almost
in the right.
off the upper right. He's almost off the sheet.
You almost have to expand it. And
yeah,
obviously he doesn't play as many minutes as some of the other guys, but still in terms of pressures per 60, dump-ins recovered, this is a top-end forechecker who maybe there's some offensive ability there, but if there's not, you still have a really strong third-line wing or fourth-line wing, however it works out. Is the return light? I think it's debatable. I think getting a right-handed defenseman of Kesselring's caliber is not the easiest piece to acquire, as Kevin Adams has shown over the last 5 years that he's been trying to acquire one. I think he is, the idea is that the Sabres gave up the best player in the trade. I think we'll see. That's how I feel about Kesselring, frankly. I think we'll see. I think Kesselring has a chance to be the best player in this trade, the most impactful player in this trade. But the lingering question coming out of the deal is, how do you replace the offense, right? So I like the players they got back. I don't mind getting rid of Peterka, but it has to be the piece to a larger puzzle. And here we are, what are we, 5-6 days after the trade? Can't remember what day he was dealt. And we are wondering where the other pieces of the puzzle are.
Yeah, Kevin Adams said he had a plan. I don't know. I don't believe that moving Peterka was part of the plan. So he immediately deviated from the plan.
It was not. But, 100% it was not. They entered, and he even said as much, they entered the offseason thinking they would sign JJ Peterka.
Yeah.
And so that's the curious part of we have a plan, right? It's like, well, the biggest piece of business that you've done wasn't part of the plan. So, but yeah, just to clarify, it was not part of the plan. And that is another important piece of context here, is that JJ Peterka, to an extent, forced their hand, right? He did not want to play here anymore. He made it clear he was not going to make it work in contract negotiations. And the calculus from Adams was, are you going to keep around a guy that doesn't want to play here and drag this out, or are you going to try to be somewhat proactive? I would argue they weren't proactive about the situation at all. You probably could have moved him, at the deadline. Maybe you don't get player for player deals. He was proactive enough, right? He got not totally boxed into a corner, but also wasn't way out ahead of this situation either. But Peterka made it clear he wasn't going to play here. So that has to factor into how you look at the deal too, because I've seen some people look at it from a bird's eye view, and I don't think people in Buffalo do this. Maybe they do, but they look at it as a cost saving move. Like the Sabres didn't want to pay Peterka and thus traded him for 2 cheap players. But I don't really see it that way, because I think they would have paid the player.
Yeah, a couple, I guess. So for me, mentioned it last week, I thought it was in their best interest to make the deal sooner rather than later. From that perspective, it was nice to see Kevin pull the trigger on this. 2, I think that getting a 2-for-1, as the Sabres are an organization that's on a lot of team no trade lists. We talk about it ad nauseum. You have to draft and develop. When you do draft and develop a player that gets to the status that Peterka got, whatever that status is, he was very attractive as a commodity, got to fill 2 holes. And he did that. He achieved that. Kind of in the back of my mind with this one, I think it's fairly well known that JJ Peterka was a favorite of ownership. Terry Pagula really liked JJ Peterka. And what does this do to the psyche of Kevin Adams, who maybe had this reputation as kind of just listening to Terry all the time and asking for permission, and to have that conversation with ownership to get them to talk them into trading Terry's favorite player? Do you think this frees Kevin up to really take control? And he has, Yarmo in his corner and Eric Stahl to kind of help talk him up to go have that conversation with Terry Pagula. Do you think there's anything to that psyche where this was a milestone in his career as general manager of the Buffalo Sabres, or am I just making shit up?
You might be making shit up. I'm not sure. I
I
mean,
don't
it
think I
could
am.
be. I
don't think
think
I
it
am.
could be. I think we'll see, right? Like anything with Kevin Adams at this point, for me, it's I'll believe it when I see it, right? I'll believe that he has crossed some threshold into, look, we're in year 6. I think the time for milestone trades should be beyond him, but here we are.
Doesn't
It's the
matter. I'm just saying that for the
no, I
moment in
think
itself, I
it's
think it
a
was a
good,
big thing.
and it was a different kind of trade because it was a young 23-year-old player. Like you said, it was a favorite of ownership. One of his, I would say, Adams' best draft pick, right? So there's, something to that piece of it as well, where you're clinging to your own players, right? He's been accused of falling in love with his own guys too much.
Well, that's part of it.
So I think there's something to that, and there's something to the idea that he just got rid of a guy that might have ended up being a problem, right? I know it was. I think it was easy enough to do with Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, Rasmus Ristolainen, and it was like, all right, who wants out? Line up at the door. I'll get the best deal I can for you. This one was a little bit different. This was the first real dispute at this stage of Adams's tenure and build, if you want to call it that, of the Sabres. So milestone in a sense. I'll agree with you there, but I guess whether it dramatically changes who he is as a general manager, I guess we'll see. Because to your point about having a plan in the off season, or we have a plan. He was real confident about it. Now I don't know if it was like we have a plan to trade JJ Peterka, or it's like we have a plan for this whole offseason to get things fixed. But the biggest piece of that plan so far was trading a guy that you really didn't want to trade, that really wasn't part
Right.
of the plan. So it's like,
So what's the plan?
I think, right. So I think you're right that the trade could be a monumental milestone moment for Adams, but until I see the rest of it, I guess we'll see.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. I mean, I'm still wondering, we'll get to the lineup and everything else. And, you can't really get to the lineup until we recap everything else that they've done. But no, I'm good with it. I do think that Utah got the best player right now because offense is offense. But the Sabres sorely needed to get some defensive help. Doan is a dog. I don't think there's a lot of people in this town that really know the player much. I think the lack of name value coming back between Kesselring and Doan led to that immediate knee-jerk reaction from the fans. I think once it sunk in and maybe they kind of heard some other things and maybe allowed an opportunity to soak in a different perspective, I think some fans, not all, there's still a lot of fans, I think, that are pretty pissed off about the trade. To your point, I can rationalize it because they filled some holes. They're trying to change the way they play. Also, if there were problems with the player that they moved out, everything gets better. The locker room gets better. Practices become crisper. The message, I think you have a greater chance of getting the guys to come together. That's coach's number one job. Get those guys to come together. So I will see.
Isn't it obvious there was some sort of problem, right? Like,
I think so. Yeah. Actually, yes.
Have you seen did you see the Sabres thank you note for JJ Peterka?
No, I kind of missed that.
Oh,
What's
yeah.
there one?
No, yeah. I think Utah had one within an hour for Kesselring and Doan, like by the time I woke up in the morning. Adams barely mentioned him by name, in his press conference. No, I mean, he was in tears when he traded Kyle Okposo. Like,
Gave Dylan Cousins a hug.
Gave Dylan Cousins a hug. He had a lot of nice things to say about Dylan, and not hardly any about JJ on his way out the door, which I don't blame him for. I'm just saying, like, it doesn't take much reading of the tea leaves to understand. And look at the body language from Peterka late in the season. Add all the pieces up. The performance from, I think, a piece of this that's interesting. Two other pieces of this that we should touch on. I think we can just say that he was enough of a problem that they wanted to trade him. Even the fact that he didn't want to play here, that whatever it was, for whatever reason, Can the locker room be better without him? Absolutely. I think you have to be careful about who you pay. I always remember this being a big thing when I covered the NFL also. It's like guys around the room pay attention to who gets paid, right? And if Peterka had gotten what he wanted, well, he got what he wanted here, right? He got out. But if that guy becomes your highest paid forward, I think it's how are you building the rest of your team? You still need a right-hand defenseman. And who else was out there, right? You're ended up with maybe, Nick Perbix. But what if he decided to go to Nashville anyways? There wasn't really right-handed defenseman out. You'd end up with Connor Timmins in your top 4 or JBD,
Matt, what message would you be sending to Alex Tuck?
Another, fair point, right? Like his contract negotiation, which he hasn't signed a deal yet. He's eligible as of today. But that piece of it, I think, is a good point by you, that as a coach, you're trying to bring a team together and you might get some addition by subtraction here. But you can't ignore the fact that you lost the goal. So a couple other components of this trade that I want to hit on are, I'll start with other deals, like the idea that they could have gotten more. Other deals that might have been out there. I think it's pretty safe to say that a Marco Rossi package was on the table, right? Michael Russo reported that, and he's rock solid, obviously, on Minnesota. I don't care about Marco Rossi at all. Like, that one does not bother me even a little bit.
You're getting the same type of personality, I think, with Rossi.
He's in the middle of a contract dispute, right?
Yeah.
He's mad that he got pushed down to the 4th line in the playoffs. And I don't know that he makes your team dramatically better. You still need, again, a right-handed defenseman. He's got some compete to him. He's got some, some hustle and some forecheck to him. He's a good player, but he is not big, and Minnesota didn't view him as a playoff type player, which is why his minutes got cut in the playoffs, at least not at this stage in his career. So that one doesn't bother me. Kyrou was floated out there by Saravalli. He thinks that Kyrou, he was a little wishy-washy on it, but he said he thinks that Kyrou might have been in play. Now, was that Kyrou for Peterka straight up? Was it Kyrou for Peterka plus? That's a tricky one. The other piece of that, though, again, where exactly does Kyrou fit? And still, we'd be sitting here talking about the need for defense, right? So, he'd be eating up a little over $8 million in cap space. He's a great goal scorer. He can play some center. That's probably how you would use him, right? You would use him as a center on your second line, maybe with Zucker and Tuck potentially, and have Benson with Norris and Thompson. But, then I don't know, maybe you keep Byram at that point and you try to, find a way to make things work. And that one maybe. But again, we don't know what other pieces, and we don't really have that one firm. Saravalli didn't have a ton of details on what that might have looked like. So that one doesn't bother me. That one's in a different category than Rossi. Like, I get why people see the name Kyrou, look at the goal totals, and get a little bit ticked off about that one. The other deals that have been floated out there, a lot of them were futures based, right? Like multiple first round picks, or I think everybody.
Chicago 3rd overall, maybe. Unconfirmed. Yeah. And
so how many people would have been pissed if they traded Peterka for a couple of draft picks?
Yeah.
Who has the patience around here for that? Not to say that those value-wise wouldn't have been good deals. Like if you got an unprotected 2026 first and an extra 2025 first, you get a Gavin McKenna lottery ticket and an extra piece of currency in this draft, that might have worked out. But everybody is on Adams and the Sabres to win now. And they got 2 pieces that should help towards that goal. Like, they filled 2 needs for the price of 1. The problem is they opened up a need in the process that they haven't yet filled. Which brings me to my other point. Unless you want to hit on those
No.
other
Keep rolling.
potential
No,
deals.
the one thing I was going to say about Kyrou, positional versatility is nice because I do believe he could play center, even though he hasn't done it a lot in the NHL. Played a lot of center in the O. But not sure. That felt like more of just amassing talent necessarily than it did building a team to me.
Yeah.
And I hate saying it because he's a hell of a player. But we talked about it on the phone, you and I, and like, where does it go? Like, where does it fit? And it wasn't as easy as you might think by just adding a guy that can score 35.
I liked the idea. I don't think this was even on the table, but like Jake Neighbors from St. Louis. I liked.
He solves more of what ails this current group of forwards.
Like you can picture that because he fills a skill set need that you didn't have. So
old school Eastern Conference type of hockey.
So the Kyrou one was a little tricky. But yeah, there's not a whole lot else. And again, these are all deals that we're not entirely sure all the pieces of, right? The Rossi one, it sounds like, was Rossi plus, picks, prospects, maybe another roster player. Different packages thrown out with Rossi. But when it's centered around Rossi, I get why they wouldn't go down that road. I really do. So the other piece here, did they get enough? Did they not? Who knows? Who knows? Well, time will tell. I don't mind the guys they got back. When it comes to replacing the scoring, they also, before the draft, was it before the draft or? Yeah, I think it was, signed Jack Quinn to a 2-year extension, 3.375 average annual value. As of this moment, he's sort of your number one candidate to replace some of those 27 goals that you lost. He and probably Zach Benson, right? I think
maybe I think it's going to be by committee replacing Peterka's goal scoring load because Doan could theoretically chip in a few extra.
Kesselring scores from the blue line, right? Like,
yeah,
not
bonus.
A lot, but
but also there's the objective was to allow fewer goals.
Allow fewer.
Yeah.
Give up a few, score a few less, give up much less, you would hope, and you become perhaps a better team. But the Quinn signing, my knee jerk was that it was too much money. And it strikes me as I don't mind it now. You see the market play out and what some other guys get, and you're like, okay, he didn't earn this, but based on having a lousy season and still getting 39 points and his age and his draft pedigree and the injuries, all the context, like it's fine. But you're sort of caught in the middle here where he gets a decent chunk of change. But if he really goes off and bounces back, you haven't really baked any upside into this contract. Like you haven't made a bet on Jack Quinn. But there's also, you didn't go the 1-year route either. So it's a little bit of an in-between. I guess it's a bridge, but you almost had to bridge him. I don't know that you could have bet long-term on Jack Quinn after what you saw last year, but I think Jack Quinn will be better off without J.J. Peterka. I think getting rid of J.J. Peterka should serve as a little bit of a wake-up call for Jack Quinn. These two guys and Cousins. Yeah,
I think the wake-up phone started ringing the day Cousins was moved.
The kid line, right? They're going to play together for 15 years, and none of them could order a drink yet, and now they're all gone, which goes back to the plan, right? Like the plan to build a fourth line that was going to roll teams over, and one guy's left. The plan to have the kid line that was going to dominate for however many years, and Quinn should do some growing up this summer. And if he is seriously committed to his training, should come back and help you replace some of those goals. 18 months ago, people probably would have said you were crazy if you said J.J. Peterka was going to be the better player. maybe not crazy, but like 18 months ago, definitely 24 months ago, people would have said, come on, like Jack Quinn's the better player, right? And a lot can change in a couple of years, but all of the injuries are part of that. And Peterka got more opportunity because of it. And I've been down on Jack Quinn. I think anybody who listens to us knows that. But I also look at it and say that potential is still in there. But man, the skating's got to improve. He's got to be better away from the puck. He seemed like he had a harder time adjusting to Lindy Ruff than just about anybody on the team. And we'll see if he has a different approach come September, but all of a sudden he's like one of the most important guys until they bring in somebody else, right? We'll see what else they do, and we'll get to what they've done here on July 1st, which is not a lot, but there's not a lot of candidates that have walked through the door to replace those goals. And so a bounce back from Quinn would go a long way.
Yeah, they need him to play some big boy hockey coming out of the chute. They need him to really work his ass off. Maybe this new strength and conditioning staff can sink their teeth into him. On the thought that Quinn got paid more than maybe what he was deserving, I understand it's not everything, but AFP did have him on a short-term deal. A 2-year deal was going to come in just shy of 3.5 per their projections. He got shy of 3.5. What was it? 3.3 something?
3.375.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess my point in bringing up their projection is they're usually right around market and what happens. And so it seems like he got what the league thought that he would, despite not scoring a goal until December 15th. He did have 39 points, right?
That's what I mean. Like terrible season and had
right?
39 points.
And still had 39 points.
A lot of that came when the Sabres were proud of it, right? And so,
well, yes,
it's still hockey, right? Still games, right? They were still playing NHL teams, but I think he had 16. I forget the number. I had it in my story when I wrote about the contract extension, but it was like 16 points in his last 15 games or something like that. So he finished the season really strong, but his on-ice shooting percentage was also pretty high toward the end of the year. So
well, yes. So his overall shooting percentage, I'm looking at just the month of March. Let's forget those last couple of games in April for a second. I would take this month, every month of the season. He had 4 goals, 7 assists in 15 games. So 11 points in 15 games. He shot 20% in March. But he scored against Philly, scored against Washington, scored against Ottawa. It's not like he was, beating the Sisters of the Poor, with his goals. It's when you get in, he had a goal and assist in his last game of the season against Philly. They were definitely out of it then. Kind of came back down to earth in April, but I don't know. We're going to talk about where he fits, or just because they signed him doesn't mean that he's here to start the season. Because I'm really curious about what happens here. Yep. Okay, so I want to get to that. Hey, we are almost a half an hour in. Hit the like button for Matthew. He's been working his bag off down there. He's been at development camp in the free air conditioning. He's been watching the 8 forwards that the Sabres have in development camp, taking copious notes on what's going on down there.
Get to that. We'll see.
Yeah, I know we do. We probably will. We probably will. We should because it's topical, and it's not going to be topical in a week. You mentioned the plan. We mentioned at the top, RIP JBD. By the way, big fans of JBD, the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. We poured a 40 out on the curb yesterday when he was not qualified. That was a tough one for the show. But it is kind of odd because it goes back to the plan. So let's rewind to season-ending press conference. Matthew, can you refresh the audience on what Kevin Adams said about Jacob Bernard Darker at the end of the year? JBD. See, I can't even say it. That's why we just call him JBD.
Let me find the exact quote while you update people on what exactly has happened here.
So JBD out, not qualified, signed today with the Detroit Red Wings. Along the way today, the Sabres did some other housekeeping on day 1 of the league year, re-signing Ryan McLeod, re-signing Tyson Kozak, 3-year deal. Ryan Johnson gets a 3-year deal. First year of that is 2-way. And then the second and third years, he's making the full 775. His defensive partner in Rochester, Jack Rathbone, resigned. And we'll get to the other. Do you have the quote up while we're talking about JBD? We'll
Yes,
finish up the
so
other moves because I think we want to get into a little more detail some of the other moves that they made today. But those are the guys that they retained.
So when asked whether he was looking for a better partner for Owen Power, Kevin Adams said, it was a long answer. I'll just read it. I think, and he sighed. He had a sigh. This is noted in the transcript. It's a tricky thing to try to explain, and I want to say it the right way. I don't think I've done a good enough job of helping Owen in terms of just that guy that's out there on the ice with him every game for his first few years. I haven't been able to get that right person. In saying that, I talked to Owen today about that in terms of what does he feel like he needs in someone next to him and what makes sense. And it's interesting. He said, I have no problem playing with anybody. I have had no issue with anybody I've played with over my career. Just the one thing that helps him is someone who can move the puck and be clean with the puck touches. And here's the part of the quote that's relevant to our conversation. It's why I thought he and Bernard Docker played pretty well together because JBD is pretty simple with the puck and makes good decisions. So I guess what I'm getting at is it would be great to get an all-star right shot defenseman that can be next to him for the next bunch of years, but it doesn't always work like that in terms of acquiring that player. So we'll look at it, but I think just figuring out what that mix is something that we probably have to look at and do a better job of this summer with our decor overall. So he thought Bernard Docker and Owen Power looked good together. I mean, Owen Power is a top 4 defenseman, right? Your number 2, $8.3 million, number 1 overall pick defenseman, and you thought JBD looked pretty good with him. He doesn't even get a qualifying offer. And today signed a 1-year deal for $875,000 with the Detroit Red Wings. So a guy that had enough demand that he got signed on day 1 of free agency. So not a total afterthought, right? He didn't get a huge deal, but he got essentially his qualifying offer. What confuses me about this is people are really pissed about this, which makes me smile because JBD has been such a big part of this show. So it's part of why I love doing this show, love our listeners, our community, like Sabres fan, like the fact that the Sabres have enough fans that are pissed about, that care enough still, that they're mad about this situation. I love it. Like those are our people, right? And they're not wrong in this situation, in my opinion, because I'll start by saying I've seen some people say, oh, they gave up a 2nd round pick for Bernard Docker. I don't really think that's the calculus of the trade. But the fact of the matter is he came over in a very significant trade. Dylan Cousins and Dennis Gilbert for Dylan Cousins, Dennis Gilbert, and a 2nd round pick.
2nd round pick, yeah.
For Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard Docker. The 2nd rounder wasn't for Bernard Docker straight up. It's hard to parse what was for what, right? But as the trade stands now, because Gilbert was a UFA, so the fact that he went to Philly and didn't re-sign in Ottawa is different calculus than what the Sabres did here with Bernard Docker. To not extend him a qualifying offer is really confusing to me because he gets signed pretty quick. At the very least, seems like he would have been a trade chip, right? Like there were contract projections based on what Bernard Docker had done that had him making like $2 million on a 3-year deal.
1.8. Yeah.
Like, it's like, this is not a nobody player. In 15 games that he played, once he got healthy and got his visa situation straightened out, he had 4 points. He was +3, and he had a better than 50% expected goal share. And he played.
Man, he was hungry. He played hungry.
He fought. He got in a fight, and he's not a fighter. Like he wanted to be here. He competed. He played pretty well. He's right-handed. He's 25 years old. He's a former 1st round pick. Kevin Adams just spent the whole weekend telling us how hard it is to find right-handed defensemen. And this is a mildly useful one, as at the very least a 6th or 7th defenseman, good depth, righty that balances out your lineup. Part of what I can't quite wrap my head around with this is you signed Jacob Bryson in March to a 1-year deal. Bryson's lefty, smaller, and not as useful. And so Bryson will probably end up playing in the AHL at times this year, I would think. But the eagerness to sign Bryson and then to not even let things play out a little bit with Bernard Docker, right? Qualify him and see where it goes. Maybe you trade him, maybe you keep him, maybe you just have him play on an $875 deal like Detroit's going to do. And you make that bet on a 25-year-old right-handed defenseman. So they got rid of Clifton in the Connor Timmins deal. This is the other sort of piece of this. They trade Connor Timmins, or they trade Clifton and another second rounder, this year's second rounder, for Connor Timmins and a prospect. So you're sort of paying to get rid of Clifton's contract a little bit there.
It was a weird trade. Yeah.
You're paying to kind of get rid of Clifton's contract because the prospect is like an ECHL guy mostly.
Beliveau is, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a coast guy.
He hasn't really helped maybe play in Rochester, but it's not as if it doesn't seem like he has serious.
He's a minor league foot soldier. We've seen him at the Prospects Challenge.
So Timmins was traded at the deadline along with Connor Dewar for a 5th round pick. So they're talking about, well, I shouldn't say they. Kevin Adams talking about Timmins over the weekend as a guy they've been tracking for a while. That like if they had a chance to add him. He got moved at the deadline for a 5th round pick, along with another player that probably could have been a nice flyer for the Sabres, Connor Dewar. He's a hustle energy guy.
He's got some intensity, yeah.
I don't know. If you were keen on this player for so long, wouldn't that have been the time to make the bet? So the asset management, I actually wrote this down. The second round picks. So here's what the second round pick thing.
You're going to make the JJ thing sting even more when you go through this.
Well, there's that.
For the fans that are really stung by it. Yeah.
I don't like that it's being thrown out there like, oh, it's just a second round pick. Like second round picks don't mean anything. Blah, blah, blah. Like they can. 2 of the biggest RFAs to sign in the last week, Matthew Nyes and JJ Peterka, were both second round picks. Like those are lottery tickets that you want. They're not lottery tickets that you want to throw away. So the second round picks, if I have the list right, hold on a second.
Matthew's got the whooping cough.
If I haven't missed anything, and you could probably catch me on this if I have, because you've got an encyclopedic knowledge of this stuff. But 2020, they picked JJ Peterka. He's gone. 2021, they took Poltapov, who hasn't come over yet. If he does, might be a useful player. Kisakov. They did not extend a qualifying offer to Kisakov. He's gone.
Yep.
2022, they took Topias Leinonen. They just signed to an entry-level contract. Far from a sure thing to pan out into an NHL player. 2023, they had 3 of them. Wahlberg, Sturbach, and they traded one in the Jordan Greenway deal.
Yep.
So that second round pick got them Greenway, who they've since re-signed to a deal, $4 million.
Sturbach and Wahlberg not at development camp. Go ahead.
Not at development camp. Done developing, I guess. 2024, Adam Kleber, and they traded one for Beck Malenstein. 2025,
Muhlenstein.
2025, they traded as part of this Clifton for Timmins swap. And 2026 is already gone as part of the Dylan Cousins trade.
Yep.
Not the best use of second round picks over the court. The best one that I don't know, what are the best ones that they've had? Peterka, obviously, but he's gone. So I guess what? They got Kesselring and Doan now. Do I put that in as assets acquired? But
let's use the trade tree. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Wahlberg and Poltapov.
10, 11. So
could be solid.
They've had 10 in Adams' tenure and have thrown them away recently. Like recently they've been throwaways, right? But they're not nothing. Like there's some good players that get picked in the second round. And we just spent the weekend, everybody was getting excited about Bedkowski, the 3rd round pick. Like second rounders are occasionally quite useful. They're useful for acquiring players, certainly, but you can find some good draft picks there too. So if you're upset about Jacob Bernard-Docker, I don't blame you, because it feels like somewhat careless asset management at the bottom of the roster.
Yeah, I mean, he's used 2 second-rounders to get a 4th liner, which I don't have any problem with Beck Malenstein, but I think that, a 4th liner and a 5-6 D. I don't know. It's tricky. Yeah. It's I don't know. I thought that the Clifton deal was a big price to pay, but to your point, I think this is where you're going with this. So when you move out Clifton, it makes not qualifying JBD even more suspect, because he's a right shot and because of the glowing review that he had in the postseason press conference. Can't imagine JBD said, I don't want to be qualified. And why would they do it anyways?
Right. Again, it's like you're Jacob Bernard-Docker. You're going to take what we've given you. He played pretty well. He was fighting for the boys at the end of the year. Like, I don't know. Is it much ado about nothing? Maybe, but Lindy has made a big deal, and so has Kevin Adams, about the left-right balance on defense. And you just took a piece away, a piece of lineup flexibility. As it stands, you have Byram, Dahlin, Power, Kesselring, and Samuelson, Timmins, which is fine. I guess Ryan Johnson and Bryson are your depth guys right now. Maybe something comes back if there's a Byram trade. Steve Noble points out in the chat here, I'll throw it up instead of just reading it. Josh Doan was a second-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
in his second year of the draft. Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to go through the second rounds of the last however many drafts, but if there's somebody out there yelling loudly about how second-round picks don't matter, I just think it's a load of junk. Like,
no,
they
do.
How much of their roster? I mean, their bottom 6. How much of it has been built in the second round? Like half of it, between Greenway, Doan, and Malmstein. So, I mean, it matters. But now I'm looking at the defense depth chart and thinking, man, I would have felt a lot better if Bernard-Docker was sort of your 7th, waiting for, Timmins to slip up or get hurt, or Kesselring's banged up, and you can plug a hole there. But aren't you going to have the same problem to an extent until you add another right shot? Especially if you trade away Byram, who he's not right-handed, but who's playing with Dahlin then?
The only thing I see this is maybe there's a little bit of a pathway for Ryan Johnson and or Jack Rathbone to plug those minutes at a similar dollar. They're managing, I don't know. What are they? I don't even know what they're at. I haven't looked after today, the number of contracts that they're carrying right now. It does make the Bryson thing, I don't want to beat the dead horse there, but we kind of called it out the minute that deal happened. It just
I don't think
makes
it's beating a dead
thing
horse at all. All of a sudden it's relevant again, because it's like you just squeezed out a guy because you had to have Bryson in March. Before you had made your plan. You hadn't even made your plan, and you had that had to get done. Had to do it. And when I asked about why, the answer was about how great of a teammate was, how much he loved being here, how much he loved being a Sabre, all these things, which are all true. And he is a plus guy, like absolutely one of the nicest guys. Loves Buffalo. Why did it need to get done in March? He probably would have been fine waiting it out.
Yeah.
Right?
A player that they didn't qualify a year ago, by the way,
and still came back.
Signed
right?
him.
Like, a lot of goodwill built up with this player. He really likes it here. Like, why of that guy of all guys do you need to like shoehorn into the plan when you probably could have easily waited until July 3rd to see how else everything shook out and added him as your two-way 8th defenseman, 9th defenseman organizationally?
Back of my mind, I was thinking when he wasn't qualified that they were going to do the Bryson thing and maybe just say, hey, we want to bring him back, but maybe at the same salary or pay cut, as opposed to giving him the bump that he gets with the QO. But it just didn't happen.
No.
Didn't happen.
I mean, as soon as he was not qualified, his plan was to go to market. And so I don't know if you were but the qualifying offer was what, 860,000?
Something like that.
What were you
Yeah.
going to save $100,000?
Yeah. I don't know, but it brings me back to what is the plan? That's how we got into JBD. It wasn't to, say we're pouring a 40 out on a curb, all that stuff. I mean, that's fun to do because JBD, we were both boys with him. JBD, we hardly knew ye. But what is the plan, right? What is the plan? I guess we have to find out. Pierre LeBrun said this could go into later in the summer. Maybe there's a plan. Maybe Bowen Byram gets traded before we hit end stream tonight. Who the hell knows?
That'd be
I
good.
I don't know if it was McCrell or one of the guys in the chat was saying, Byram might get dealt before this podcast is over. I guess we'll see. Maybe then we'll know what the plan is. We mentioned Connor Timmins coming in that deal, in the Clifton deal. Timmins, capable player. I'll tell you what, when you look at his numbers, when he had that short stint in Pittsburgh, I think it was less than 20 games that he played. He was pretty good with them in terms of his metrics. His offensive production was up, but it's not really about that. A guy that blocks shots. Pittsburgh really controlled the puck more when he was out there. I think his Fenwick and Corsi numbers are both on the better side of 50%. 4.69 block shots per 60 for Timmins last season. I don't mind that number. Wasn't leading the way, but for the minutes that he played, decent. So, I don't want to sit here and say, speak about JBD as like he was some kind of key piece or anything like that. For me, it was, I think, missed opportunity to have the NHL ready depth and a guy that was hungry and everything else. But Timmins does help you maybe understand it a little bit. Getting that guy in here, more size, maybe a little bit more hardcore defensive acumen, perhaps. But we'll see. Right? We'll see how he meshes playing up with Samuelson, likely. And other moves today, Alex Lyon comes in. We talked about maybe not going into camp with just Levi and UPL as a tandem. So now Alex Lyon comes in 2 years, 1.5 AAV for him. Justin Danforth, kind of an interesting one. And I don't think it's just a Jarmo Kekalainen love fest here with this player. Danforth, this organization goes back far with him. I think his first full-time professional contract was with the Rochester Americans when he came out of Sacred Heart, which is now a long time ago. But a high compete guy. I think you looked into some Justin Danforth numbers. But he comes in 2 years, 1.8 million. Per. Right. Thoughts on, you want to follow up anything on Timmins? Thoughts on Danforth?
Timmins can see Key Bank Center from his parents' cottage. Yeah, across the way. He's a
Crystal Beach almost, or
something like that. I don't know.
Somewhere
he's from St. Catherine.
Yeah,
so he can see it, the smoldering.
But he also said, "I heard good things about the city." It's like from across. The lake.
That was interesting. Yeah, it's like he's a Bills fan, I think.
Okay,
so he's got that going for him. Danforth. Also in that all three zones for checking data, among the best in the league at recovered dump-ins per 60. And again, he's not playing as many minutes, that caveat, but good at getting the puck back. You've got now all of a sudden a couple of guys that are much better forecheckers than just about anybody they had on their roster last year, maybe outside of Benson, has that skill set. Might give you a clue about how they want to play a little bit. And Danforth, so they traded Sam Lafferty for a 2026 sixth round pick. Got that $2 million off the books, got Danforth's 1.8. Probably fills a similar role, right? He played 45 of his 61 games at center last year, I believe, and 16 of them at right wing. So a little center wing versatility, which made my antenna go up a little bit in regards to, could Peyton Krebs be part of a package at some point to get you something? Maybe. But either way, he's probably, bottom line, right wing. Mallenstein now, maybe the extra forward, depending on how it all shakes out.
I think it's peak. You're going to need some PK mules out there, and it's going to be hard to take him out of the lineup.
So you got Greenway. On the left side, you have Benson, Zucker, Greenway, Mallenstein. At center, you have Norris, Kulik, McLeod, who signed 4x5, Krebs, and at right wing you have Thompson, Tuck, Doan, and Danforth, and Quinn. So Quinn has to slide in somewhere. Somebody's got to come out. Does Krebs come out? And you go Danforth, Greenway, Mallenstein on your fourth line, and you go McLeod, Quinn, and Doan.
I have a hard time seeing where Quinn truly fits. And I mentioned this today. I said, and Marty was up doing the TSN thing. So I was on with Duffer and kind of talking a little bit about Quinn. And I said, I don't know where he fits. And someone on Twitter, I think Mr. Gross, maybe you're in here, so shout out. He said, Kris, how are you? Because I mentioned how I'm still kind of cool about keeping Byram, even though I don't expect it to happen. He said, how are you going to replace Peterka's goals? And you mentioned Krebs. Good call out, by the way, I think, on Krebs. We haven't talked about him a lot in the past couple episodes, but now with the Danforth signing, Krebs becomes a possible chip. You talking to Pittsburgh? Because to replace goals, I want to go back and I want to talk about Brian Rust one more damn time. And do you give him a choice of like choose two of these three? Krebs, Quinn, Ryan Johnson? You've given up a lot. Got to get something back. Maybe you get another second back. Pittsburgh has 3 seconds next year. Shit, I'll take the Winnipeg one. But would you do that? Would you do something like that? Then you can kind of clear a logjam a little bit. You're offering 3 former first-round picks, 3 first-round picks. Solves the Quinn issue.
It does
it's
solve
a lot. It sounds like a lot, but it's like
it feels a little heavy, a little bit for.
But I value Rust's overall presence on this roster. Forget the goals,
the leadership, the offense, the
cup experience.
He's exactly personality-wise what it seems like they're after. Just Kesselring and Doan, 2 guys that are, really positive locker room influences, I think, and mature, even though age-wise, they're not super old. There's a maturity about them. And Rust would elevate that to another level. He'd be like another Zucker in a way. They did play together in Pittsburgh for a bit, so I feel like you could match those 2 up. You could, you could have a little bit more lineup flexibility, I think, if you had Rust compared to Quinn. You'd have a little bit more certainty, too, in terms of what you're getting offense-wise.
Got a little bit more jam in your lineup.
He's not perfect, but he, being 33 but he's got 3 years left on that deal, a little more than $5 million per. I mean, thought he was a decent bet earlier in the summer. I still think, now that the trade protection has gone and there's, maybe Pittsburgh is trying to recoup whatever they can for him. I mean, Ryan Johnson at $775 for the next 3 years is a nice little asset. I mean, he's a usable NHL player right now.
Because I like Ryan Johnson. You know this, right? And I think that a team would be higher on Quinn, the whole get him out of Buffalo factor. I feel like you're giving up a lot potentially by making those names available. I do. But you also have to clear some things out a little bit. And I'm not against overpaying to get a guy of Rust's resume here. I need to get 3 good years out of him. I don't mind his contract. I don't know. Something I've been thinking about today. And I don't think that trading Jack Quinn just because, like, you can't trade him just because you signed him. I think it's compelling. Get something back to even it out if you feel like you're giving up too much. I don't know.
It kind of feels like one of the, maybe not the only move left, But I'm trying to think of. So let's look at the remaining free agents. Should we
I got
pivot
it
into
up
that
here.
now? What are
Yeah,
we
I got
at?
it up.
45 minutes, 55
We're
minutes. So let's
we're
pivot into
55
that.
in.
Because
Yep.
if not
Someone-
Rust, then what?
So if you're looking at forwards, I'll go through and give you some forwards, okay? Nikolai Ehlers. Pia Suter. I think Dadonov already signed. He's still on this list. I think he signed today. Roslovic. Then you get into Victor Olofsson, Jeff Skinner range. You're starting to go down a slope right here. Gus Nyquist, Andrew Mangiapane. You can get into some role players if I expand this list a little bit. There are some RFAs if you really want to get wild. You want to get wild. But other than that, we're getting into some guys that are known to be retiring also, Beauvillier, I don't really have much on, Kiviranta. Mason Appleton. Apparently it's not signed yet. That's not a bad name, actually. Should I throw out a couple RFAs just for funsies?
Why not?
Gabe Velarde, Marco Rossi, Mason McTavish, Voronkov, Capocacco, Alex Laferriere, Morgan Frost, Max Siplikov. I know that our audience is probably sick of talking about Rust. So that's why I just said one more time. But I want to throw that out there. I feel like you're giving up a little bit there to get that player. And I understand that there's a thought that he doesn't play defense. That's not true. He just had bad results. But I'm willing to I think that his leadership resume would offset some of those shortcomings. Because you could say, how can you talk about JJ the way you've been and then say you want Rust? I get it. I'll acknowledge that. But Rust has a resume. Yes.
Different.
We always
player.
say been there, done that. Yeah. What are you thinking when you hear those remaining free agents?
Not thinking it's the most inspiring list. Ehlers is not coming here, I don't think. I mean,
He wants to be somewhere warm and not have the intensity, I think was part of it. Kind of like to your point about why guys like playing in Florida.
Quieter, right?
Yeah. I don't know if Matthew Tkachuk and Brad Marchand can walk up and down the street now.
Well, probably, maybe not now, but those are different.
Not now,
I mean, Brad Marchand is a pretty unique face. Tkachuk, those guys are. Reinhardt still probably can, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. He scored 4 goals in a freaking clinching game for crying out loud. But
so you're probably not getting him. I do like Appleton, but is he a needle mover? Probably not. Another right wing, right?
You can't sign him without moving some other bodies out.
Well, that's the thing, right? Especially considering how heavy they are now on right shots, unless Danforth is playing center. And then, I don't know, you're going to move Krebs to left. They got to move some bodies out, is what it comes down to. If the most likely way to, loosen the logjam is via trade. It's a roster spot issue. I think they have 21 guys signed right now and 2 RFAs. So that's your roster. Unless you start moving some pieces out, like they did with McLeod. The McLeod trade was a July 5th, I think, July 6th last year. So it's always the tricky part of this time of year is totally going scorched earth on what Kevin Adams has done until you see the total picture of what he's done. But there's not a lot of moves left, but he does have a big chip in Bo Byram. Where are we at on Bo Byram? Today, the latest was from Darren Dreger that, Vegas,
LA,
Calgary,
we talked about
LA, but
Calgary.
LA made a couple of signings, so I think LA is probably out. Maybe not totally, but they signed.
That was a knee jerk. As soon as they lost Gavrikov, was it Cody Ceci, and I forget who the other one was. Oh, Dumoulin.
Yeah. So big enough contracts that makes you wonder whether they would also take on Byram.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a market out there.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think.
But Drager also floated the possibility of an offer sheet that a team might be. St. Louis, I think, was thrown into that batch of teams. Columbus, I think, has been thrown out there. at various times. They lost Provorov, right? Who
St.
signed
Louis picked up
Provorov?
Logan Mailloux today. Do you think for Bolduc? I don't know. Look, not the same player, obviously, but I wonder what that does if they had a
Oh, Blue
desire.
Jackets kept Provorov. My mistake there. So,
Yeah.
um,
But
so
St.
I don't
Louis
know.
picked up St. Louis picking up Mailloux. I wonder if that tamps down any interest that they may have had in Bo Byram. I don't
So
know.
the market's thinning out. Maybe you keep them. I don't know, and do your business elsewhere. But you're still missing. It seems like now they have the prospects to maybe get a top 6-ish caliber forward. I mean, we saw Jason Zucker perform that way when not a lot of people expected him to perform that way. So the path to replacing the goals is not impossible. The path to being a better team defensively is pretty clear based on what they've gotten. Maybe even clearer if they keep Byram. But what else is out there to do? It's going to have to come. It feels like it's going to have to come via trade. I did find it interesting that Kevin Adams is not speaking until like roughly 10:30 tomorrow, tentatively. And that was something that was decided upon like this yesterday. So not common. You saw most GMs were talking at like 4 or 5, 6 o'clock today and sort of wrapping up their business. It's almost as if Kevin Adams knew business wouldn't be done, maybe.
Or he's trying to push it as close to that July 4th holiday and people bailing early into the weekend as possible.
Could be. That could be it. I think it's going to be a scrum tomorrow during practice, so it won't have the pomp and circumstance of
Smart move.
a typical free agency press conference, but maybe that means Kevin's going to stay up late and pull off trade. Cale Clegg going to Winnipeg.
Yes.
Yeah. So good for Cale.
Yeah. He was excellent for Rochester.
Yeah.
Excellent.
He had a good year down there.
Part of and to wrap up what the Sabres did today, by the way, they did add a element of toughness. This is going to be a harder team to play against next year in Rochester. Picking up Mason Geertsen, he's a Western League product, been through a couple systems. I think most recently in the Vegas system. Is that right? I haven't checked.
Yeah, he can chuck them. He's
a tough
go to
kid.
hockey fights and look at him.
Yeah.
He's had some good ones. So maybe they can pull him up for a game or two. Maybe
So
they
he
can
does
pull
have
him
the
up when they play
NHL
New Jersey, and he can square
There you
off
go.
with Nason at the opening faceoff.
Someone's got to do that. They should actually. What the hell?
Pull
Why
him
not?
up.
Why not?
He also won
but
the community award. So sounds like good guy for Rochester.
So he does have an NHL two-way deal, slated to be down on the farm, and can maybe plug a hole if needed if you're in a pinch when you play Jersey. But that was really it. Underwhelming overall. Alex Lyon, look, I think he perfect profile for the tweener type of goaltender that you want to throw into your mix. 2-year deal, doesn't do anything. Doesn't put you in any precarious positions. Best when you look at his numbers, by the way, being a guy that hasn't always been the man, he comes in, he wins more games than he loses when he plays in the NHL. Kind of a good sign in terms of a guy
from the Buffalo Sabres a couple of years ago.
He did
with that big win.
He did
the difference-making win.
But I think that, and a guy that I skipped over when we were looking at the possible goaltenders that they could make a call on, I just kept skipping over him for some reason. But then when you wake up and you hear the news today, you're like, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So uneventful, but that one, good to see.
Yeah, it gives them the option to put Devin Levi back in Rochester. And it's not a guarantee that, Levi spends the whole year down there, but it's insulated your goaltending depth chart, which was much needed, I think. Going into the season with Lukin and Levi was just not going to be smart.
Imagine if they keep 3.
I could imagine it. I've lived that before.
I know. On the Mason Geertsen side, David Dietz writes, Komarov doesn't need to throw with people now. Doesn't need to, but I bet you he does, David Dietz, because I think that's just how Komarov is wired. And I think he even came back and said, yeah, I'll do better the next time. So you never know, Deeds. But no, good call. I mean, look, between, having Jagger Joshua down there, if you have Dunn back down there, they're going to be a harder team. But having Geertsen down there, he does have an NHL element, right? Like I mentioned. But, certainly an underdog. Things would have to go totally sideways for him to be in the NHL next year. But no, I hear you, though. I hear what you're saying there, Dietz, on Komarov. Anything else on, I want to get to the chat since we're over an hour in, and I skipped out on the chat last time. So I want to give us plenty of opportunity to kind of pick off some chats and interact with those that are in mourning for JBD, maybe venting, maybe disagreeing, maybe not liking the Brian Rust talk. I haven't seen any of that. I'm just guessing. But, because I think we covered most of it. While you're fishing through, let me just talk about the draft real quick. If you want to line up some chats, Matthew. Mentioned that they had a type. They went big, right shot D, picking Mertka at 9. Kind of like what you saw with Doan. Kind of like what you see with Danforth. Kind of seeing compete. That was kind of the flavor for me for what the Sabres did with their draft class. Mertka aside, right? When you look at what they did on day 2, Bedkowski, who, by the way, we talked about David Bedkowski last week.
You did.
As it just made perfect sense. It just made perfect sense that this is an element that they need. Even if they took a right shot defender at 9, you go and you get another one. Perfect match for what this organization craves. Noah LaBerge from Bathurst in the queue. He's got some edge to him. He's got some edge. When you look at the forwards that they took 4 checkers. They took 2-way responsible guys. Kuharczyk, Schultz, who's going to be playing at North Dakota next year. Schultz, by the way, played at the same high school that Adam Kleber, or the same not high school, same Bantam AA program. Because, Schultz went to Minnetonka. Same Bantam AA program that had Kleber and Brody Ziemer. This is Chaska Chanasin. Novotny is another guy, just like a checker. He's got some offense to him from Laxand's junior system. Rusinski's the guy that really doesn't have that hardness to his game, but he had a really good end of the year in Youngstown. I think, what do you have, 19 goals last year? I don't have it up in front of me. I didn't write this stuff down. I think like 10 of his 19 goals came in his final 13 games of the season, had a good playoff year, kind of a late riser going to Ohio State. It's going to be interesting. That kid, I think, 7th rounder, nice lottery ticket. We'll see. And then the goaltenders. I think they got some really nice talent in net. Hey, have you seen Prokhorov down there? Did you get a chance to see how he moves?
Yeah, he's here. Pretty big. He's not huge. He's like 6'3". I guess none of the goalies look huge when Leinenen's on the ice. He's a monster. But yeah, he moves pretty well.
I think Milosh is a good pick.
I like,
17 years old. Yeah.
I think he goes to the same goalie coach in the offseason that Levi does. So he's got good quickness, moves around well, and he ate a lot of pucks in the queue this year. He saw a lot of shots, played well in the playoffs. Both these guys played pretty well in the playoffs, finished their season strong. I like the bets on goalies with the late picks because I feel like disproportionately they hit more than other positions, right? Because that's when most goalies get picked, and you can kind of change the calculus on the value of a prospect if you hit a couple of those, and you always got to keep it stocked. You don't know how Leinenen and Ratzlaff are going to turn out, and hell, you don't even know how Levi's going to turn out. So, the more guys you pick, the better you are.
That Milosh kid's 17 years old, doesn't turn 18 still for a couple weeks here later in July. 6'2". I like 6'2" goaltenders. I think I mentioned, I think 6'2" is like the perfect height for a goaltender, and they're big enough, especially if they have longer arms than a normal 6'2" guy, even all the better. But with the rules changing, maybe Milosh is a kid that you can see go the college route too, and you can sit on him. So, because that gives you time to sort out the whole Ratzlaff, Leinenen, Ryerson, Leenders dynamic. I don't know. But they had a type. I think with the skaters that they went for some hardness. They went for some forecheck. You saw it today with how they shopped Even with, like I said, the Doan and Kesselring, just those elements, they were sorely lacking on the top club roster, sorely lacking the pipeline ranks. So they probably gave up a little bit of offense to make those picks, but they needed to infuse some of that profile into the system. Matthew, any thoughts on the draft? You want to dive into the chat?
Let's dive into, well, I will say about Bedkowski was overly impressive in his media availability, just as a person, as a speaker. Not common, at the NHL draft when it's 17, 18-year-old kids. That was pretty cool. And Mertka, I'm good with the Mertka pick. I think as the board fell, it was a solid and somewhat safe pick, but one that, you could see a path to that one really panning out in a big way for sure. And maybe what I found interesting was that Jerry Fortin mentioned that the top 6 of the board fell exactly how they expected, and that Mertka was next on their list. James Hagens went 7th. I don't think I would have just openly put that out there, but
yeah,
because I don't agree. I mean, if now some people, when I put that out there, said like, oh, they're just, that's what everybody says, right? They got their guy that was higher on the list. They're gassing him up. But that's like, you didn't need to say that he was higher than James Hagen. And
what did I just say though about the hardness and what they looked
type,
for?
Whatever.
Maybe that was part of it. Maybe that was part of it.
I don't agree, but Jerry Fortin spent a lot more time in rinks watching these kids than I did. So
we talked about this
as we watch those careers unfold.
No, that's a good call out, actually. That's a good call because Hagens is I think a legit 1C prospect, most NHL teams. We talked about it going into the draft last week. Center was pretty solid there, especially if you consider Kulik still a prospect. He hasn't played, 65, 70 NHL games yet. So right now,
I don't know. He's a top 6 center on this team.
I know. But I have him on my depth chart here. Right D, though. You have Mertka, Sturbach, Kleber, Bedkowski, Komarov, McCarthy, and Brunet as your right shot D in your prospect ranks right now. All of a sudden, the holy grail, the right shot defenseman, is their position of strength. Average height, 6'3" and 3/4 inches in that stable of right shot defenseman. Average weight, 206.25 pounds, 206.25 pounds. It's pretty good.
If that's the hardest thing to acquire in hockey.
Yes.
You should have trade assets, right?
100%.
You should be able to move some of those guys and make something happen at some point. I mean, you're not going to be able to use all those guys. But Sturbach's not at development camp this week because of a personal matter. Mm-hmm. Something to, didn't get a chance to check in with him. But Kleber's here, and none of the Rochester guys are here. I mean, not that many guys are here, period. 8 forwards, 5 goalies, almost as many goalies. I'm actually really curious to see how the scrimmage goes on Thursday because they have 8 forwards. I guess it's 3-on-3, so you could.
They're gonna have the goalies out there skating.
I guess, yeah. They,
shooting on each other.
Have a few guys skate out, or you can't really have the French Connection tournament, can you? You're not going to have enough teams for that. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. I mean, we can get into the chat. Do we get into the chat? Do we want to talk about development camp? I mean, the development camp thing is really confusing to me. Like, I look at this camp as
okay. I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk about development camp. Hey Siri, set a timer for 5 minutes.
I don't know if I'll last 5 minutes. What it comes down to for me is a few years ago, this was important enough for some big names to be there, right? I believe Quinn, Peterka, Power, Samuelson were all there in 2022 when they were getting ready to be on the NHL roster. Suddenly, it's not so important for your entire Rochester team to be there. You don't want to interrupt their summer training, this and that. Never mind the fact that you have a new strength coach who is apparently world-class, and I'm excited to see what he does, but like, wouldn't you want your prospects, many of whom are undersized and physically underdeveloped and need to get stronger, to check in midway through the summer and meet this man and get some pointers and maybe get yelled at. And, you know, can he do it over Zoom? Sure. Can he text them their plans? Sure. But would it have been that hard for a lot of these guys to simply... The interrupting the summer training thing is confusing to me because it's like 5 days and they're going to continue to train while they're here. If you don't want them skating, if they're worn out, then let them just lift and do off-ice stuff. Build camaraderie with the other fellow prospects, show some leadership, show guys around, take some ownership of the organization and pride in the organization. If it means you're only going to have 8 forwards if you don't bring all these guys, bring some of them so that you can actually get something out of this camp. Otherwise, if it's not that important, that's what you're signaling, that it's not that important, that it's more so just draft pick orientation. But why is it important for Kleber and Jake Richard and, you know, Brody Ziemer or Topias Leinonen? Why is it important for Topias Leinonen, but it's not important for Konsta Helenius, who's only had one of these? Or Anton Wahlberg,
who's still clumsy and right.
Right. And physically, I mean, that's a guy I want to meet with Gallivan, right?
Yeah.
To get him quicker, you know, like, I mean, not every guy that's meeting with strength and conditioning, or, you know, not every plan is the same. And if you're building plans for all these guys, wouldn't you like to see them in person? Check in on where they're at. I don't know. It's my 2 cents. I'm confused by it, but maybe there'll be time to get around to it when Kevin Adams talks tomorrow. There's not a lot of moves to discuss as of yet, so maybe that will come up.
I would like to hear his position on it. For me, development camp has just become kind of a blah event. For me, it was always about that camaraderie. So I'm glad you mentioned camaraderie. The relationships that form with these prospects when they're together for a week in the summer, I think does matter. So now, though, you have Jake Richard leading the way. Who's leading Jake Richard? You know,
Jake Richard's the leader. Yeah, he's
you know what I mean.
And he has grown up a lot. He's definitely taken on some leadership at UConn. He's a really interesting prospect to me. We actually had a chat in here. I don't know if I started. Said I think it might have been Cantor, actually. Apologies if I'm misquoting you, Cantor, but he said sign Jake Richard and throw him in the top 6. He's got a shot, and he's right. He has a great shot, and he's actually really good around the net. I love that he's been able to develop that part of his game at UConn. Caught a handful of his games last year just because in the little spare time I do have during the hockey season, usually if I'm flipping on non-NHL hockey, it's Hockey East. So I like Richard, and I like that he's kind of taken on some leadership here. He has actually been in Buffalo for like the last month leading up to this camp. He's been with Gavin McCarthy. Oh, really? They're friends from junior, so he's been staying with McCarthy and skating. He's been skating with Mike Ansell and doing a lot of, the skates that they do at the Academy of Hockey. So seems bought in. I know some are worried about him being a flight risk because he got 1 year. Next year he could become a free agent. So we'll see what they do with him, but whether they can. But I think that little Gavin McCarthy bit and the extra time he spent in Buffalo is probably helpful in that regard, because I do imagine he could get a contract somewhere else, given how he's developed.
You came in at 4 minutes and 40 seconds on your development cap wrap, and I took up some of it with my little nonsense. No, I agree with you. I don't lose a lot of sleep over it, but I do think that the whole philosophy on development camp has shifted under this Kevin Adams regime, really the past 2 years, and it's just radically different than it was. I mean, the Eichel draft, they did a development camp scrimmage at the main arena, and I know.
Damn near.
Which that was too much. Like, that was just too much. I mean,
maybe, but again, engaging with fans. Well, here's the other thing.
That was the whole Eichel cash grab bullshit.
You're a draft and develop team, right? So shouldn't every single bit of development matter? Right? You can't attract free agents. You can't, you got to build from within. It's the only way out. The only way out is through it. Well, shouldn't every little thing matter?
Working around the edges. Matthew, we're on 20. Let's hit the chat.
Jonah Bronstein asks, do the Sabres regard this camp as more or less important than Baker does my interview requests? Has Jonah Bronstein been requesting to interview you?
Jonah Bronstein, intrepid writer for WIVB.com, did reach out to me last week at a very tough time of the week.
Well,
so I couldn't get to him quick enough. I responded to him the next morning, but it was too late. I apologize, Jonah. I'll buy you a water next time I see you.
Let's get to the chat.
No, seriously, man, he caught me in the middle of the workday, like one of the worst work days I had. So he doesn't want to hear that. He just wants results. He didn't get it.
That's right. Sabres have. Okay, let's go to
Jonah. He's going to get a text for that.
What do you think about McQueen? Dan.
Yes.
Carpentieri asks, should they have drafted McQueen?
I mean, he was there in the hopper. I had some, just because the player said that his back was good. I don't know, man. I worry about the medical. I think in the back of my mind, I think I know where Dan's going with this, because there's a very good probability that he is a excellent, like certainly a top 6, maybe a top line centerman. Skill, hands, really good. I think he's got this mean streak that's going to emerge through time. And it's just like, there's this possibility that in 3-4 years, 5-6 years down the line, you're like, holy shit, the Sabres had a chance to take this guy. They took Murtka, because of the package. But I don't know if they should have drafted McQueen. I think the familiarity, the lack of viewings, I think does matter. And I think that they wanted to just mitigate risk, take a more known commodity that they saw more of and were just more comfortable. But no, McQueen, I think could hell of a player when he's been healthy. He just hasn't been healthy a lot in junior, and that's a problem.
Plus McQueen going to Disneyland wearing number 95. If you know, you know. Lightning McQueen.
Lightning McQueen. Yeah.
It's fitting. So the Sabres didn't want to ruin that. I can respect it.
I guess. I don't like that hokey shit either. Okay, let's continue.
But it was probably down to McQueen and Murtka for me. And you were in a position where you could take the risk on McQueen, but I can follow the logic train on why they didn't. Sylvan Gladu says, sometimes I wonder if Kevin Adams can't tell the difference between wanting to play in Buffalo and wanting to play or stay in the NHL. And that is probably a bit at the root of their issue. Like, how many of the guys that want to play in Buffalo want the opportunity and aren't, will look for the next best opportunity as soon as they can. I think there's certainly some of that goes around. And that's where finding these high character people, the Doans, the Kesselrings, the Danforth, your hope in that is that they can start to just help guys take ownership of this franchise, of this team, of this, product that they put out there on the ice. And I think it's wavered at times in the last few years because you had Kyle Okposo as the captain 2 years ago wanting out, a few months into the season. And you had, two guys with letters walk out of the room last year. And then another guy with a letter get traded in the middle of the season this year. Another guy with a letter, at the center of the most embarrassing moment in a very embarrassing season. So bringing in some leadership, guys that it feels like they're on shaky ground as far as the whole wants to be in Buffalo thing, right? A lot of these guys that were ground floor, young, draft and develop, growing from within. Things have gotten hard now. And that's where you learn a lot more about these guys. Everybody wants to be in Buffalo when they're handing out contract extensions and power play time and top 6
Yeah.
minutes. Who wants to be in Buffalo when it's getting hard? Who has the personality that you're looking for a solution and trying to fix something and not just running to a more convenient situation? Have they found enough of those guys, and can the collective, I heard Don Sweeney talking today because scoring is a big question in Boston, and his thought is if they play the game the right way, if they, they're A, going to play better defense, but B, it's going to lead to more offense if everybody, collectively just plays the right way. There is something to that, but I'd like to see a little more pop in this lineup that Buffalo has right now, offensively anyways. But it's a good call out on this chat, because I think they do fall into that trap of this guy wants to be here. It's like, well, he might just want to be in the NHL. Nice to be in the NHL. I'm going to kick this one over to you.
Go for it.
Because we've talked about this. Byram for Byfield straight up. Who says no?
Who says no? There's less of a need. We kind of hit on this already. I think there's less of a need for LA to want to do this. They're more likely to say no.
I think LA says no. I think if
Byfield's got a lot of high ceiling.
People say this a lot. Something happens and everybody's like, if that's the case, Kevin Adams should be fired tomorrow. And usually it's overreacting. But if Byfield's on the table and he hasn't taken it, then that's just insanity to me. LA says no to that, I think.
LA says no, even without the Dumoulin CC deal. But I do think that Byram makes a lot of sense in that lineup. I've said it before. I'll say it again. He makes a lot of sense out in LA.
Carolina's already off the board as a trade partner because they went and got Keandre Miller. So
big package.
Paid him a lot of money.
Paid him a lot, and I think they gave up conditional first, a second. Scott Morrow.
Prospect, yeah. So it's going to come down to maybe will the Sabres be willing to take a somewhat futures-based package on Byram, because there might be some good ones out there. Calgary still interests me the most. Even if you don't get Anderson or Weegar, I'm still interested in Calgary because they have enough pieces around the edges, and they have...
You need some no-move clauses to be waived.
Well, that's the problem. But they do have picks, too.
You're talking about Blake Coleman, right?
I do like Coleman. Coleman would be my number one target on that team for sure.
100%. If you can't get like a Rust, last time I'm saying it, Coleman would be a really nice one to call on. But you don't have the hurdles with
But
Rust
yeah, getting him to waive. I mean, it is a real kick in the nuts. I will give Kevin Adams that. This palm trees and taxes and the delivery of it was no good. But we, like Noah Dobson gets moved. Is that even a deal that you get to be in on, right? If he's not going to sign an extension, you're not even bothering making that trade. So that's where how many deals that are potentially out there you get no shot at. So you got to thread the needle and find the ones you do have a shot at and try to talk people into it. It's obviously all their own doing, of course. It's their fault that they have a 14-year playoff drought, but it does limit your avenues to improvement.
On the Byram piece, Mike Lipinski says Byram is going to get you futures. If that's the case, I'm not moving him at all. I'm going to try to work with him, get him a fair money deal, take him into the season. Why do you got to trade him now? Why is everyone in such a damn hurry? Because I know it's out there in the rumor mill and everything else, and maybe there's more to the story that we don't know.
I think people are in a hurry. I think people are in a hurry for the simple reason is they don't see other paths to the type of move that could really impact the team. And if you don't trade Byram, what else can you do to dramatically improve your team? But you do have prospects and you have futures to move. So I don't know.
I like my Russ deal better than I like taking, Byram out of the lineup for futures.
That's fair. And I think you could probably convince Byram. Like, look, take a 1 year, take a series of 1 years, right? Take a 1 year
Take
now.
a 2. No, give him a 2 because it's movable. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
give him some money for 2 years. Take him to UFA. If we don't trade you, you still walk.
Yeah, you walk in the prime of your career at 26 years old or whatever.
Or you test the market. Maybe he has success here in 2 years. Maybe he's like, holy shit, playing with Rasmus Dahlin sounds pretty good for another 5 years. Why is that off the table?
Right. He's still, extremely young player who played really well with Dahlin. The defense looks okay right now. It doesn't look great if you move Byram, because the secondary piece of that is if you move Byram to get your scoring, you got to do something else to get a defenseman, and a lot of those guys are picked over now. Anybody in the chat want to raise their hand who's ready to see Samuelson with Dahlin opening night? I didn't think so. So that's part of this too.
What else we got?
Eric No Sleeves McGee says Jacob Bernard Reinhardt if you listen to some. LOL. Yeah, it's been a fun day in Jacob Bernard Docker discourse. I gotta say, it was. I get people getting upset about the little stuff because it's the little stuff that adds up over time to get you to here, right? I mean, look at all these free agent signings, all the missed opportunities, all the little things done around the edges. But if Jacob Bernard Docker scores 4 goals in a Stanley Cup final game in the future, that'll be a great day on Sabres Twitter, that's for sure.
It was a great day when they traded for him, and Kevin was in his little scrum down in Florida with you guys, and he's just like, yeah, in JBD, and it was just like the legend was born right there in the hallway in the hotel.
Yeah, it was. It was short-lived, too short-lived, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And he's a nice guy. He played well. Gone but not forgotten. We'll see him. There'll be the JBD revenge game. Will we get a JBD video? Welcome back, JBD, when he comes.
We're not going to JBD. All right.
I think we might. Can't overlook it. Dennis Gilbert got one. He was here for like half a season.
Let's keep this chat moving. We're already at an hour 32. Our audio people are going to kill us with this dilly-dallying. And I got a dog right here that needs to go out.
All right, let's do one more chat from AAA. Got the picture of a palm tree.
Can you hear the dog, by the way, whining?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's right here. She's got to go to the bathroom.
She's mostly panting.
Yeah.
Who are the Sabres better than in the Atlantic Division? Maybe Boston? Are they better than Detroit or Ottawa? They obviously aren't better than Tampa, Toronto, or Florida, or Montreal. That's a fair question.
That's why they play the games.
That is, yeah. I mean, on paper, no. They haven't chased down those teams, but I don't know. Yeah.
They're not done yet. They might be better than Detroit.
They might be better. Detroit's not overly impressive and hasn't done much. They handled Ottawa fine last year, interestingly enough. And Boston does look pretty rough. So we'll see. Toronto lost Marner. He decided not to come south down the QEW and went to Vegas instead. Bold choice.
Did Alan Pergamit get the story wrong today in the Buffalo News?
So that's an interesting...
do we want to go there?
I think we did have a chat bring up something related to that. So Joe Pinter was let go.
Out because I work with those people.
Joe Pinter was let go a few weeks ago, and my understanding was it didn't have any. So two things are true. They did move on from Joe Pinter, and I do believe Alan Pergament when he says that there are some in management, which is pretty vague, but some in management who think the broadcast is too critical. That could go in like a million different directions. I don't know how much validity there is to that, but I do believe there is a general sensitivity that exists. So I can buy that. Okay. I don't believe Joe Pinter being let go had anything to do with that.
Fair
but
enough.
I don't know exactly why he was let go, but it didn't sound to me when I heard about it that it was anything specific related to the criticalness of the broadcast, but people drew that line pretty quickly. So it is what it is, but I think that particular connection, I think, is not really how I understand it anyways. I think they do a good job on the broadcast for what it's worth, but I know you got to sit it out. You have been on the broadcast. Maybe that's why I think it's such great work.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you filled in for Marty for a couple.
I'll tell you what I will say though, that broadcast, they do point out the team's shortcomings. I think a lot of people like on social media, because again, not the best gauge. They're like, all they do is try to like talk positive all the time. They should go after him. They're employees of the team. You go and talk negatively about your employer and see how that goes for you.
Yeah, you got to do it with a certain level of tact, right? When you're pointing things out from a hockey standpoint.
People out of their friggin' minds, though, at the same time, like want them to go out there and just lambast the team all the time. Fuck, give me a break.
That's not how these broadcasts are set up.
That's why it works, man.
That's why when they're on ESPN or TNT, and you're like, holy shit, you hear what Ray Ferraro said? It's like, yeah, of course he can say it. Like,
right?
Like that's an independent broadcast. It's a little bit different. But yeah, I feel like the connection there that like a lot of people that I saw there, it was like Joe Pinter got let go, like he was the fall guy for a critical broadcast, and I just don't think that was reality. But so it goes.
Couple quick ones here before I get ready to bounce out. Is Poltapov signing this year? No, he's got 2 more years. I'm looking at him year to year. Maybe he's a guy that can get out of his KHL contract after 1 more year, but he does have a 2-year deal with Seska. So not expecting to see him anytime soon. And then Bill Conley asks about Steven Sardarian. Is he still in the organization? It's been ambiguous, but we do believe that Steven Sardarian has declared himself no longer a bona fide student after his 3rd collegiate season. He had a gap year in the AHL after getting drafted, so now he's 4 post-draft years. If he did indeed declare himself a bona fide student,
he's not
no longer a bona fide student. I think this kind of seals it, the fact that he's not at development camp. I'm led to believe, but unconfirmed at this point, at least by myself. Matthew, I don't know if you've confirmed it, but I
have not gotten a clear answer on it yet.
I don't believe he is part of the organization anymore. My personal opinion, if he wanted to leave college and try to force his way into the pros, at least in North America, he got bad advice if that's what he intended to do. But I don't want to go any deeper until we confirm. But right now, I think reading the tea leaves based on sites that monitor players' rights have taken him off, Puckpedia, some others. I think Elite Prospects took his little draft information off their page. He's not at development camp. We'll see what happens when Michigan Tech posts their roster.
Yeah,
for the 2025-26 season. That'll be coming. If he left
college,
soon.
That is an interesting decision. It makes you wonder if he would go back home, maybe. But he came over here so young. I don't know. Yeah, it's
here's the thing, by the way. We'll also know if he signs a contract with another team here in a couple of days.
True. He had a good year last year. Still work to be done, but he had a good year.
Yep. So no, he had a great year. I mean, he had a great offensive year. He made progress off the puck, but not enough. So if he had someone in his ear telling him, "Hey, you're ready to, go and play in the AHL," I would say the hell he was.
And the Sabres may have thought the same thing.
Perhaps. But I wouldn't. Just like Mariala, I think some of those guys, you throw a freaking contract at him and see if you can do something with them. It's kind of like what they just did with Topias Leinonen. Topias Leinonen got a deal. He's still like a 2nd-round pick. I get it. Sardarian was a 3rd. Sometimes you give a guy the contract as runway to keep developing. Could have done that with Mariala. Certainly could have done that with Sardarian. But I would have been more inclined to do with Sardarian next year, not this year. Anything else that you started, Matthew Fairburn? Now you got me all pissed off. Sardarian's bad advice if that's indeed what went down.
You
didn't do it. I'm the one who threw the chat up.
Cantor's asking me to ask a question, but I don't know what he's saying. So clarify that in the chat. We'll keep the chat open here for a couple more seconds while I throw. He wants me to ask Kevin something tomorrow, and I don't know what. I can't promise if I don't know what. Can't promise anyways. I got a lot of stuff to get to tomorrow. But I'll end it with this. Plan. We don't need no stinking plan.
Badges! We don't need no stinking badges. Good call out there. Good call out there. All right. I'm ready. I'm gonna log.
I think it was a good show.
Time. Yeah.
We'll get back together when they do something else.
We will. Hopefully it's soon. They're not done. I think it's pretty clear. Look, we defaulted. We talked about free agency and the tweaks that they made, and my mind, and I think you got there too, or you were already there, and I just didn't pick up the vibe, was that we quickly default to a trade. When you look at the lineup, when you look at the lines, when you look at what they're doing, it's not all the way gelling together. They can't be done. And when they do something to address this, and this makes more sense, Matthew and I will do a show. We're also going to do some other things we've talked about this year, some fun exercises. We're not going to wait around
wants me
forever.
to ask about Sardarian.
Okay, ask about.
So
Sardarian,
I've asked the team for clarity on that, and I'm still awaiting. I'm gonna get to the bottom of it at some point. So I don't know if it'll come up tomorrow, but if it doesn't, know that I am efforting to get an answer there.
I suppose I can ask too, but you're down there, so let's go ahead and do it.
We'll have some more. We'll have some more shows throughout the summer.
We
Kris
definitely
is going to be on vacation soon from real work, so maybe he'll want to be on here talking to you lovely people.
I would. Hey man, listen, I'm one of these days I'm just going to get up and go live at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning and test these people and see if anyone wants to just chit chat. That'd be fun as hell. Baker in the morning. I'll even get you. I was like, man,
wake and bakes.
Yeah, that's right. Wake and bakes, baby. Let's go. All right. On that note, thanks everyone for hopping in tonight, July 1st. There's more to come. We'll be around, like I said. We always appreciate you guys showing up. Appreciate. I can never say that word. Showing up here on these pop-up shows. Matthew, you can find all of his work at theathletic.com/sabres. You can find me hanging out around town and also maybe on this stream. You never know. For Matthew, for the production crew who's going to join me taking this dog for a walk, she's literally been here for the past 15 minutes whining. I think she's got to go tap a kidney. I'm Kris Baker. Thanks for joining the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. We'll see you again next time.